Hello everybody, it's Wyvern here with another bit of Total War Warhammer 2 quick match gameplay. This time around we are playing as the Empire against the Warriors of Chaos on the map Shaggoth Strand. So for this matchup I've gone with a composition that's somewhat similar to previous Empire comps I've done, but I decided to focus a little more heavily on the Greatsword play. And that's honestly a bit, but obviously to make the Greatswords work, I think that to make an offense-oriented sort of Greatsword build function properly, you'd really need the Warrior Priest. Greatswords on their own, they've got stats in a straight-up fight with, say, Chaos Warriors to Great Weapons. They're just a tad better. They'll barely eke out a win. But if you really want to be winning sort of consistently and winning efficiently against Chaos, for example, I think you do need that Warrior Priest in there to provide his AoE buff. So regardless, that's what I've done here. I've got 3 units of Greatswords. Front line is backed up by the Warrior Priest, who is providing Hammer of Sigmar, Soulfire, Shield of Faith, as well as Benediction, which I think is pretty useful. That +8 leadership is never a bad thing. I actually had my doubts about this before, but I've been finding it to be really good with Empire State troops. They are backed by Bright Wizard here, who does have the Burning Bolts as well as Cascading Fire Cloak. He also does have Kindle Flame, Power Stone, and Blast. One of the things I regretted almost immediately was not bringing Burning Head, because my opponent went with a very Marauder heavy build, and I honestly almost all the vast majority of his build, I actually think like half of his army here is Chaos Marauders, so they would have been very vulnerable to the Burning Head, and unfortunately I didn't do that. In the back line, we do have 3 spearmen covering the flanks. 2 of them do have shields, the one in the very back does not. 2 Demigryph Knights with halberds, because of course you need something to deal with Shaggoths, or to tie them down, to muck up Shaggoths, to muck up Dragon Ogre, the normal Dragon Ogres, to muck up Lords like Sarthorael and Golek, that sort of stuff. So you definitely need these guys. And then 2 handguns, one of which is the Regiment of Renowned Silver Bullets, providing Overwatch. Up in the sky, we do have Boris Todbringer. Of course, he is now coming in with Hold the Line, so he's providing that +5 melee defense aura when he's in combat, or when he's near his troops. He does have Crush the Weak, of course, White Cloak of Ulrich, as well as the Mid-Inland Runefang. So his full assortment there, and we'll definitely see how things work out. For my opponent, he decided to go with an interesting build. I've been seeing Archaon somewhat more commonly now. It's somewhat more common now. I'm a bit surprised. I don't personally think Archaon's that good, but my opponent did decide to bring him here, and he's a pretty expensive lord, but he does have decent combat stats, and he does have quite a bit of HP, so plus he's small and hard to snipe, so I don't know, maybe that's why. Golek is a pretty easy target, and Sarthorael tends to get mucked up by Cav. Regardless, for my opponent's build, and I'm not sure I'm getting these little lag spikes in the recording here, but regardless, for my opponent's build, he did bring Archaon as his lord, Burning Head, Piercing Bolts as his only spells. Then he's got Foe Seeker and Standard Die. On the other end, he does have an Exalted Hero coming in with the Mark of Khorne, which is basically just Frenzy, Foe Seeker, and Deadly Onslaught. For his troops, he's got a whole assortment of different stuff. He's got Chaos Marauders up front to soak up the charges, to soak up the damage. He's got Aspiring Champions to provide additional leadership, Demon Spew to provide an AoE debuff, and Poison. So these guys are quite a crippling power really. Between Poison, which Chaos doesn't have much access to, and Swarm of Flies, which provides -5 melee attack, these guys can make your troops a lot less effective than they normally would be. So pretty potent stuff there. My opponent also does have Chaos Warriors with Great Weapons. The only unit of them, I think, a bit of a mistake. You definitely want more Great Weapons. Even if it's just Marauder Great Weapons, you need something to crack armor on Great Swords. 2 Chaos Warriors around that, then more Chaos Marauders in the back, and then 2 Chaos Warriors with halberds. Loading into this, when I saw my opponent outnumbered me, I was very, very worried. And unfortunately, my opponent didn't bring too much AP, perhaps underestimating the Empire AP core, or the Armored Core, so that's one of the few fortunate things for me in this matchup. Over here on the flank, my opponent also does have 2 Chaos Warhounds, one of which does have Poison, so ready to dive my backline without over-investing too much. As far as critique for my opponent's build already, I do think that the lack of AP is going to be a bit of a problem, because it's going to take forever to crack these Great Swords with their 95 armor, and the buffs from the priests, and of course the buffs from the Fire Wizard, and all that sort of stuff. Regardless, I'm trying to get some initial damage, and you can see I've repositioned a little bit, adjusted my line. You can see the Demigryphs sallying forward a little bit, posturing. Thinking about sort of getting a charge in on my opponent's Exalted Hero and Archaon and units like that, trying to get some early damage. And you can see here I feign a charge. I sent a poor guy flying. One Marauder over there just goes flying through the air. But you can see, unfortunately, I'd had my handguns turn on auto fire. They're going to empty a volley here into these Chaos Marauders. Big waste, but what can you do? Regardless, the second volley is going to be aimed at the Demon Spew, who are a much juicier target. And these guys with the no shields, fairly low HP overall, they're going to be in for a world of hurt. Over here, my Greatswords do get charged by Archaon, and you can see he's actually dished out quite a bit of hurt. And what I need to do is now is just get these guys into the charge. So what I'm doing is I'm sending my Demigryphs in on Archaon, sending my other Demigryphs in on the Exalted Hero. These are my opponent's only 2 mounted units, and they are now getting slaughtered by Demigryphs. And then what I'm doing is I'm force pathing the Greatswords forward, past them, trying to get on top of these Chaos Marauders, trying to get on top of these enemy troops just to tie them down. You can see over here the Warrior Priest already popping buff after buff after buff and bombarding this area. So with those buffs, these Greatswords are going to be very hard to kill, and they're going to be dishing out a lot of hurt to these low-end Chaos troops. In the meantime, the handguns did get quite a bit of damage on the Forsaken, but despite everything going pretty well, I do make a huge mistake here. I was focusing too much on casting a spell over here. You can see trying to get a bombardment off, and my opponent at the same time gets a lovely bombardment here on my silver bullets and basically annihilates the unit. If you ever need to see the power of burning bolts, here you have it. Over half the unit of silver bullets gone. Gone and wiped. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, he does take quite a bit of a beating here from my own piercing bolts, so definitely nowhere near as good as that casting gun on me. Over here, the spears are getting mucked up by Chaos Marauders, but all in all, my line is holding, but that hard bombardment on my silver bullets that I missed and didn't micro out of, it should have been pretty easy to dodge, I just wasn't paying attention, is making me pay pretty badly here. Unfortunately for my opponent, though, I do just leave the Greatswords here in the front line to muck up these Chaos Warriors. You can see they're pretty devastating against them. They've already helped chew through Chaos Marauders, and they're still holding pretty strong. And then shift the Demigryphs as well as Boris back to deal with the Chaos Marauders. And with them terrified, getting routed off, I can then pursue them pretty easily off the field. Once again, though, missing my opponent's magic, and he roasts a good chunk of my handgunners here with a burning head, and actually gets into my spears, who just were standing around in reserve. So, big mistake from my part. Good awareness from my opponent. Unfortunately, my opponent, though, he's not really able to contain this flank, and this is really where I had most of my attention focused. You can see these Marauders getting shattered. Boris still hovering around, being an absolute menace. And although my opponent does have these Chaos Warriors with halberds in here, and they'll probably be able to beat the Greatswords in the long run, he's not really able to do much of anything here, and this is where Boris is going to dive into these Chaos Warriors, providing his support. There's a Warrior Priest in there who's a little overextended, but popping Hammer of Sigmar to make these Greatswords hit more consistently. And you can see I do get a nice little bombardment here on my opponent's Chaos Warriors, and it is doing some devastating work. The Hammer of Sigmar is giving my troops a major edge. You can see my opponent here piling in with Warhounds, another big mistake, and this means that over here I'm able to pin Archaon with my Bright Wizard. Now the Bright Wizard won't last more than like 2 hits from Archaon, but it means that these handguns are going to get an opportunity to get these lovely, juicy flank shots into the Allure of the End Times here. And you can see the poor Everchosen there just getting wailed on at point-blank range by volley after volley of black powder weaponry. And you can see the silver bullets now pivoting as well, dropping the bombardment. My opponent here bombarding my backline, but at this point, because the backlines are so thinned out, really neither of us can do too much damage there. Unfortunately for my opponent at this point, Archaon is going to rout. Boris in here disrupting everything, still very healthy. You can see his leadership at like 115 with all the stacked buffs between the Warrior Priest and just how badly he's dominating here. So my opponent's army is going to shatter at the end game there. As far as builds go against Chaos, I do think this is at least somewhat competitive. I think nowadays you could almost go a little heavier. The big problem is dealing with, say, Chosen. If I was trying to deal with any sort of build and bring a very infantry-heavy build, what I think I'd do is I'd bring the Lore of Lightcaster, probably bring Net of Mintok and some handguns in case you have Chosen, and then use the Greatswords to crush everything else. I think that with this Priest in there, they can definitely dish out quite a bit of hurt to Chaos Warriors, which are more common pick than Chosen, just because Chosen are such easy targets for black powder weaponry. I think the Greatswords could do okay in this matchup, even if massed more than in this sort of quantity. As for the rest of this build, not much to say there. The Demigryphs, one of them spent most of the game trying to snipe out Archaon, and they failed, but honestly can't expect them to get too much kill-wise. The other unit of Demigryph Knights with halberds, though, ping-ponging around, they managed to wipe out the Exalted Hero, managed to wipe out a lot of my opponent's troops in the backline. So they were doing good work. Handguns, of course, focusing down key targets, as usual. Very useful unit. If only my micro was a little more useful, they would have gone better, I think. Spears held, not much to say there. There's honestly not much to say for most of those units, but because they did their job, and that's really all you can ask of them. For my opponent's build, interesting to see Archaon. I don't think going wide is bad against Empire. I think that's actually a really good idea with Chaos, but what I would recommend instead of this sort of light-ish build with a lot of Chaos Marauders, definitely you don't need this many Aspiring Champions. I don't think Archaon and Exalted Hero are very good against Empire. I think you're better off with Kolek to give you some heavy-duty anti-large, bring at least a single unit of Dragon Ogres to counteract enemy Demigryphs with Poison Warhounds. Maybe even double up on Warhounds and Dragon Ogres, and then the rest of your front line can be some somewhat cheap troops. You can bring a little bit of AP with Chaos Warriors, great weapons. You should have just enough money to manage to squeeze that out, and you should be able to sort of beat your opponent down with numbers. Normal Marauders will trade well enough with normal state troops, and then the Halberdier and down, essentially, except for Flatulence, probably. And then if you bring a handful of Chaos Warriors to Great Weapons, they can mop up Flagellants and trade well enough with Greatswords to give you an edge elsewhere. So that's just my 2 cents on my opponent's build. I'd probably bring a Shadow Caster if I was going to. But I don't think it's necessarily the most efficient anti-Empire build. But definitely not on the wrong track. Definitely with a bit of improvement, I think you could get there. I just think you definitely want to be bringing more anti-infantry AP. Greatswords are a very common sight in this matchup. Regardless, and plus, if your opponent gets cavalry into your line, normal Chaos Warriors, much less Marauders, are not going to do very much to them at all. Reiksguard will run amok and do whatever the hell they want. Whereas if you've got AP, they can. If you've got great weapons, they can chop Reiksguard down. Not as well as Halberds, but they can still do damage. So something to keep in mind. Regardless, good into my opponent, Gaboon Viper here. Great game. I do hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, be sure to leave a like and subscribe down below. If you have any comments, any criticism, any questions about the game, anything like that, as usual, be sure to post them down in the comments, and I will respond as soon as I can. I have had some issues with the comments in YouTube recently. They weren't displaying properly for me, so I had trouble to respond. I wasn't really able to get answers out efficiently. I had to go checking through my different videos, and I might have missed some. But regardless, I do try to answer as soon as I can. As usual, guys, I do appreciate you all for watching, and I will see you all in the next one. Wyvern out.